over passion. We are here to just have conversations that I don't think are happening enough. You know, the church, it tells us a lot of things that we shouldn't do. We don't always get what we should do. And we are grown, yet we are not having conversations about relationships, about sex, about abstinence, about just a lot of things, boundaries, how to have conversations, how to, bring relationships to a different area. And so I have with me my friend, Ajane Nibaye, Minister Ajane Nibaye, shall I say. And we have known each other, 20-ish years?
Mm-hmm.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute. Probably a little gap in between, but it's been a minute since we've known each other. And
right.
I appreciate you. You know, there are things that you have shared with me, things you have said with me, even way back then, even if so something small like a scripture that has always stuck with me. Something as small as like in Galatians 3, why when we're doing things by the Spirit, do we then pick it up and try to, I'm paraphrasing, it's the Rachel Silver version of the Bible. When we doing stuff by the Spirit, we just pick it up and try to do it ourselves instead of allowing Him to continue it through us. That was something I remember 20 years ago that you pointed out to me, many years ago, that I always have to reset and be like, wait, I don't gotta do this. God, you doing this through me. So I appreciate that. And just so many other things, so many other conversations, just candid. You've always just been very open. You've always been very non-judgmental. I know I'll be, sharing a lot. So I definitely appreciate you. And I appreciate you for coming on and just having a conversation with me. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to introduce what we're going to be talking about.
All right. Again, my name is Ajane Nibaye. To some, I just go by AK. It's just simply my initials, nothing else to it. I grew up with both my parents in the home in a Christian household. So I grew up in the church. Personally came to know the Lord around the age of 10, and really began to take my walk seriously around the age of 12, and really started to get in the Bible for myself, develop my own prayer life, and started to grow spiritually in that aspect. In my younger years, we moved around some. I was born in Trenton, New Jersey. We moved back and forth some from Ohio. We lived in Akron for a little bit. And then we moved back to Ohio again, and we were in a country area, a small town called Hammondsville, Ohio. We lived in an area where we actually lived on a farm and had animals and things of that nature. So I experienced that part of life too. So I've been in different states, different areas, from the city to the suburbs to the country. And just in growing up, my experiences were kind of from those perspectives. And I had to learn to how to make it all fit once we finally came back to New Jersey and Trenton, kind of adjusting to the inner city lifestyle from my background, which was a lot different, combining all of them. Trying to find myself and my fit. That was a big struggle in my teen years, which is a little bit natural in the teen years, but mine kind of came from a different angle. And so I tried around my middle school years. I really went through that trying to fit in process, trying to dress a certain way, trying to fit in, trying to talk, speak the language. But I realized I didn't fit. And that was one of my prayers, God, what is my purpose? What am I here for? What's my identity? Because clearly this is not it. And I began to just really get more serious in my walk and my prayer life, seeking God. And as I read the Bible more, I connected more in church. I could hear the sermons and understood what they meant. And so I began to grow spiritually. And then by my high school years, I really began to accept myself more, my identity, and how I stood out from the crowd. And that made me stronger spiritually, but also caused others to see me differently and began to come to me and share things with me and allow me an open door to speak into their lives. So that was a blessing as well. Also during those times, my high school years, I began to get more involved in my community, other activities, and that built me into more of a well-rounded person outside of even just school and church. And it also helped open doors when I went away to college, and as going away to school, I was successful and started campus ministry there. I was an average student, about a C average student, but I maintained well, but I was very involved on the campus. My senior year, I became the student government president, which that's actually how we met, because Rachel was also student government president at her school, and that's how we met originally. And from there, life just kind of grew and took off, coming back home from school, staying involved in ministry, staying involved in community, building my personal life. And so that's where led me to today in a place where I'm still always work with young people, so working with youth, always in some aspect of ministry involved, and family. I have a daughter who started kindergarten this year, who won Student of the Month her first month in school, kindergarten. So
nice.
Family history, that's that Nebai bloodline.
Okay,
so,
the legacy.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of some of just the basics of my background that's kind of brought me to who I am today.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we met, I don't know if we met in North Carolina or if we met in Maryland. Was it North Carolina?
Now that I think about it.
We met at one of the conferences.
Right. So it might have been in Maryland then, the NASAP conference.
Right.
It might have been that then, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely met. We were both, like you said, SJ presidents, so both leaders of leaders. And, begin to, one of the things I appreciated about you is I couldn't give the candid answer. I remember something was going on campus, and he was like, so how's everything going? And I think I shared everything that was going on. He was like, I asked how you were doing. He told me about everything else, how everything is going. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I definitely always appreciated, that lens that, could see beyond just the surface, that could see beyond just what was going on. I always appreciated that. And so one of the things that, has been on my heart, about maybe 2 years ago, I think it was, I was having a conversation with a guy. It was, I think, April. And I was like, he was like, you should just, look for a guy that is just going to treat you well. Don't worry if he's abstinent. Don't worry if he's, a man of God. Like, you don't need all that. Just, if he's going to treat you well, he's going to do right by you. That's what matters, because there's people in the church and they doing all kinds of stuff anyway. So that's what you need to do. And he said something. He was like, because let me tell you, and he was, pre-presenting his case for himself, of course. Oh. But he said something, he was like, because abstinent men don't exist. And I said, wait. For the last year and a half, I had actually met quite a few men who had chosen to live a lifestyle that included abstinence. And so I was like, nah, wait, now that don't sound right, because they do exist. And I was like, you know what, it's probably some other female having this conversation thinking, man, this dude is right. Abstinent guys don't exist, because they may not be privy to some of the conversations or privy to some of the experiences that I have with people. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna write a book. I didn't finish that book, but I was like, I'm gonna write a book. And I looked back and I actually reached out to 47 men who were abstinent, interviewed over 30 of them. And I realized, it wasn't that I'm gonna write a book and encourage me and the ladies. It was honestly something that I think would be more encouraging for men. Like, it wasn't for me. And I think that's one of the reasons I kept stopping, was because every time I began to interject my own thoughts to what someone was saying, I was like, nah, that's not what this is. We need to hear what the men are saying, what the men are speaking about. And have that lens and have that perspective beyond just, what we're thinking it is. And so, that was a couple of years ago. And then about a year ago, I was on a call. David Burris was doing a Kingdom Marriage Institute series, and one of the lessons was talking about intimacy. And while it was geared to husband and wife, of course, he has a mixed audience, and so there were definitely singles on. And so during that conversation about intimacy, the ladies on there was like, sharing some of their frustrations. Abstinent men don't exist, all this kind of stuff. And in the conversation that I was having with Coach the next day, we were just talking about, how it went and, kind of giving feedback. It was a great teaching. He's an excellent teacher, so it was a great teaching. But as I was sharing, he was like, some of the things that you're saying, people need to hear, when you do an abstinence course, because of course I make courses and programs and stuff for people, so why not do an abstinence course? And I was like, nah, I don't want to do an abstinence course, because honestly, I'm ready to be married and having sex. Like, I don't want to write a course about something and I'm quite honestly not interested in either.
Right.
And so, he's like, well, what about like a summit or like an online summit or something? I was like, man, if we were to talk about something like that, I wouldn't want to hear from another. For me, I wouldn't want to hear from another female. I would want to hear from guys. Like, maybe we could talk about some of the areas, that we can build a skill in. But I want to hear from guys. He was like, you do whatever you want to do. So what I did was I interviewed him and his wife because they had been abstinent for 3 years prior to marriage. So I interviewed them too. And then I invited you and another gentleman on. And I basically interviewed you guys on there as well. And I did share some different areas, that we should focus on. And one of the things that you pointed out during that online Let's Talk About Sex, Let's Talk About Abstinence Summit was it's not about what you're not doing, it's about what you are doing. If we focus on what we are doing, then we can be a lot more successful.
Right.
And so we've had a lot of conversations since then.
Right.
And one of the conversations we were having is why is abstinence so taboo to talk about, like in church or to talk about with men? Like, why is that a subject that we just, it's like, I don't want to talk about that. Like, why? Why is that the case?
Well, I think it's the approach of it and even sometimes the language. One, just to go back at the real core of it, God created us to live. God created us to do, to be, to express, to activate. And so when you hear the word abstinence, the only thing that comes to your mind is not doing, don't do, abstain, stop. So it kind of speaks against our nature to a certain degree. For example, a car is designed to move. It's designed to be driven. If you let a car sit for too long, the car will naturally rot. I think something like that. Okay. So I'll leave that alone. But a bike, you let it sit too long, it starts to rust. Like, they're designed for movement. And so in the same way, we as human beings are designed for movement, for activity, for life, to live, to express. And so sex is an expression, it's an action, an activity. It is by God and by the scripture designed for a certain place and point in your life. And so, if the conversation was more about moving towards that or how to move towards that place, it's a more engaging conversation that people are welcome to hear. But if it's just like, abstain, don't do it, God gonna get you, this and that, then it's just like, here's another rule, another thing I can't do, another thing. Well, why spend time on that if I'm designed to do? Then show me how to do, how to go about it. And if I can't do this now, what can I do until then to build and prepare me for that place? So I think that's one of just the main things that that is a problem with just the word and the language of it. But I think also it's a part of, I think the church, sometimes the way the church uses language or uses scripture or understanding about things, it's that it's another rule. And when you look at how in the Old Testament, God's approach was a little more rule-based. The 10 Commandments, thou shalt not, was most of what the commandments said. Because of sin, we had to now be able to separate thou shalt and thou shalt not. What should we not do? It was kind of presented a certain way. And so, but when Jesus comes in the New Testament, he doesn't approach life as a thou shalt not. He approaches life as this is how to do, this is what thou shalt do. Live like this. When you look at the, what we call the Beatitudes, Matthew chapter 5, he says, blessed are the humble, blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they will be filled. Blessed are those, and so he's saying, blessed are those who have a godly character, and this is what they will do, and this is what they will gain and inherit by it. So he's not telling us a bunch of what not to do. He's telling us what to do, how to be, how to express what God has given us. When he takes his disciples, he's showing them, he's preaching the gospel, he's traveling different areas, taking territories, conquering the enemy, healing the sick, raising the dead. He's showing them what to do with the energy, the passion, the drive, and the gifts that God has given you. And so that type of conversation causes you to want to follow and to move in that direction, rather than just having a bunch of rules. Don't do that, don't do this, don't go there. It's dangerous over there. Don't club, don't drink, don't smoke, don't have sex. It's like just a bunch of don'ts. And that's kind of sometimes how the church approaches life, especially for young people growing up. And there's not a bunch of do's or to-dos, except for just behave, listen to your parents, get good grades in school, and be quiet in church, So it's like, but that's not life. But Jesus said, I came to give you life and life more abundantly. So what does that look like? How do I live that? How do I express that? And so I think that's part of the taboo or the situation that happens even in church as well, is the approach to the word and sometimes things in general.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, even when I think about the Old Testament, when the Ten Commandments came, it wasn't that it wasn't something new. It was something that they hadn't lived by because they were in captivity for so long. I mean, we knew at Cain and Abel that you shouldn't have been murdering people and stuff, right? But now it's saying thou shalt not kill. Yeah. And so it's just, when we begin to kind of go back to like the original design and we're actually living out God's purpose, then yes, the things that we should not be doing, they really should be natural. And I don't know if natural should be the word, but it really should be like a natural overflow of the time that we're spending with God and the time that we're, having with Him. And His character should then be reflecting through us. So why is it so hard? I mean, we often hear, areas that we shouldn't do or we should, reflect in, but we grown. Like we in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We older. I'm gonna leave that. We're older. And so how do we navigate that, in real time, in relationship, with one another and actually move something forward?
You're saying as far as navigating that word and that space?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that one, no matter, I'll say like this, kind of like how some of our parents or grandparents said back in the day, like no matter how grown, you ain't too grown for me. Like you're still my child, you're still my grandchild, you still have to respect me, even though you're grown, you have a little more freedom to do what you want. No matter how grown we get, we're never too grown for God. And so I think sometimes you can feel like, well, I'm grown now, so why I gotta live like this? I have freedom, I can do and move like this, but we're still a child of God. And so we're still living as God's people, and we still serve God with our ways and to be in the likeness of God. And so I think a better understanding of that will cause you to embrace the lifestyle that God's calling us to. So for example, if someone were to find out of nowhere that they were the child of a person of royalty, and now they go live in the house, with that person and they experience that lifestyle, automatically, to some degree, it's going to change your mindset about how you live, because when you were technically a general average citizen, the spotlight wasn't on you a certain way. There wasn't a certain expectation to a certain point. If you messed up, you were just like anybody else, you could fix it up maybe. But now that you're recognized as the child of this person of a certain status, there's certain eyes on you. Things you do, people are paying attention. They're going to make certain judgment calls. There's a certain level of influence that is on you. And so you have to govern yourself a certain way, but also there's a certain amount of influence and possession and territory you may have or be responsible for. And so your character, your conduct and behavior could cause you to forfeit some of those things. So I think that when we really come to an understanding as a child of God, who we are, what we have and what we possess, as the Bible says, we're a light on a hill, a city on a hill that cannot be hid. You know that when you mess up and somebody finds out in public on your job or some other place, oh, I thought you were a Christian, I thought you were a believer, this and that. Now it's like, oh, I didn't realize people even looking at me like that. So, but we can't recognize that when we fall. We gotta recognize and know that now and realize I am who I am and I live my life a certain way because of who I belong to, and that God has an agenda to be accomplished in this world, and God is using us to do that. Just say, for example, your father owned a large company and he built another plant or another store in another city, and he gave that to you to run. Like, that's much different than you just going to school, taking classes, doing your own thing. Like, now you're running this whole corporation in your father's name. You got to conduct yourself a certain way because I'm running this. The family name and reputation is on mine, and I have a responsibility for all of this. The customers we have, dealing with the government, the taxes, other business laws, whatever, all that is now under you. And so there's a different recognition and recollection of who you are and how you must conduct yourself because of the kingdom, so to speak, that you're running. So I think we have to come to a certain awareness of that. And I think when you come to that awareness, it makes it a little bit easier to live that lifestyle, knowing that it's connected to a larger purpose. And I think that's kind of what can happen with a word like abstinence or lifestyle. It seems like another thing I don't get to do. And a lot of times as Christians, like I said, we have all these rules seemingly presented to us about what we can't do. And now sex is another enjoyable thing that I don't get to do. But when you realize what you do get to do, what you are called to do by God, then you understand the meaning of this isn't just some don't do thing, but this is something of real magnitude and purpose that you do get to do, but it's designed for an appropriate place and time. And when you do it correctly, the blessings of it is much greater. And if you handle it incorrectly, the consequences that it can cause in your life for you and others. And so I think that's a way that we have to begin to navigate that, is really by our perception of the reality of God, who we are in God, and what it means to live this life a certain way and place things in their proper place.
There's a couple things that you said that stood out. One of them is, why do you think this journey is so often walk isolated? So, and by that I mean, the vast majority of the men that I spoke to were the only men that they knew in their circle who had chosen sexual discipline as a part of their walk with God, right? And then, with women, they do tend to talk more, but people will call, crying about, the fall, or whatever. It's typically an area that's not processed mentally until there's a challenge or until there's a conflict present. And we know, even from various aspects of life, that when we prepare for something, we are able to address it. And, we may not be perfect, but we're able to address it a lot better. But we typically in this area, we don't process it. We don't mentally think about it until we're supposed to be using the skills that we never learned or even talked about. Because so many people are walking in isolation. There's no conversations, there's no skills, there's nothing present. Why do you think that is, or what can we do about that?
I think a lot of people probably disagree with this when I initially say it, but if you listen to it, I think you'll hear. I think a lot of the original statement was why I read the isolation part. I think a lot of us are in isolation because we choose to be. And I think we choose to be, like, we don't really want to be, but we choose to be because, one, some people live their life as a Christian or follower of Christ, disciple. A lot of people live it privately, secretly. One. That doesn't mean that you have to go blast into the world that, hey, I'm abstinent, who else is out there? But I think when you really take something seriously and you live it out and you display it, others of like-mindedness will be attracted to you and you will connect. So I think there's some things you have to put out there. And so I give, for example, when I was on the college campus, I would go out, kind of witness on the campus and talk to people about Christ. And then I started a campus ministry with a couple of guys. We connected. So just from me even evangelizing and sharing my faith openly, I connected with other people and other guys in particular who were in my dorm room. 2 of them were on my same floor. So we started a campus ministry. We also started a guys group in the lobby of that men's dorm, and other guys saw us and started connecting with us from different floors. So now we had a community of ourselves, of like-minded people who were, living and connecting with each other. And so I think, but we had to be intentional about that. It just doesn't happen magically or by osmosis, as some people would say. You have to be intentional about going out. Jesus was intentional about going out to recruit his disciples and sending them to recruit other people. And in the body of Christ, as believers individually and as a group and a community as a whole, we have to be intentional about living our faith publicly, displaying it, speaking it, and seeking others of like-mindedness. And when you do, you begin to have that bond. So even now, I do a group of some guys. 2 of those guys are guys from college who, I already knew from back then. Another guy I met, recently. But just, through that, through church connection and other things, you connect with other people. A job I recently had, I wasn't really vocally blasting, my faith and everything. I just started on the job. I wasn't trying to cause a scene and bring attention to myself to that way. I just, wanted to do my job. But I did, have small conversations here or there. And another guy came up to me, he'd been at the company for years, and he was like, hey, I want to share something with you. I know you're a man of faith and everything like that. And we got to sit and have some good conversations. And so I knew there's another guy here I can talk to if I need to. So we have to put ourselves out there because there's other like-minded people. then I guarantee you put yourself out there, you'll be getting defined. They'll come to you, you'll come to them, you'll see and connect. So just like we're intentional about everything else, people go on social media and talk about all these other topics. You look up other groups, you find these things, you find who's who and where's where, if you can reach them in person or if you have to join a group online. We're intentional about other things. If we're intentional about our faith, we will connect with like-minded people as well.
Why do you think that we don't have these conversations though? So one of the things that I was talking to someone about was, and not even talking to someone, when we did that summit, I did go ahead and make that course that I said I wasn't going to make, right? And then an offshoot of that is like I'm looking at 10 different areas that I just don't think we have conversations on. And it's beyond, honestly, even if someone isn't living in faith, these are areas that they really should be talking about. Setting boundaries, that typically is an overflow of multiple areas in life when we don't know how to set proper boundaries, time boundaries, and different things. Expressing boundaries in an effective manner, so that it's not like going back and forth and they don't even understand what it is that you believe, but then you're holding them accountable for the boundary that you set in your own life because you never learned how to be assertive or how to express these boundaries. You add things like sexual trauma, other things in there, and then you have a whole nother, window of things that are unaddressed. And people think it's going to magically go away with marriage, but I had married friends that are like, we struggled in the beginning of our marriage because there are areas that I didn't deal with, touch, or, address in my singleness because I thought it would magically go away, once I was married. You have people who, are getting older, but they really desire children. And they're looking at things like cryopreservation, freezing eggs and stuff. And the church is like, oh, nah, believe in God. You wrong for, it's okay to talk to your doctor about these things because the flip side is there are women who have gotten married and that's just not an option anymore because they were, a bit older and had some other complications. Having these conversations, how do you manage setbacks? People call crying, God don't love me. This has never been about God's love to you. The choices that we make in following, his commandments and following him is more about the character, is more about a reflection of him through us. He gonna love you regardless. So how do you manage those setbacks and how do you have the mind of, who God is and how he sees us? It's just, I'm not gonna go through all 10, but it's these 10 different areas that when we address them, we're able to live out life a lot more fulfilled. And it's not just in this little, corner of an area.
Right. So I think part of what you said goes back to the taboo question, which another part that, that I would say to the taboo is I think that what has happened even in previous generations of the church is sometimes just by human nature, we can try to lay a hard foundation or standard on something because we're afraid it might happen. So it's like, let's say for example, okay, I have a daughter. I might be so afraid that she might be sexually active and out there in the streets that I'm like, don't have sex, no, it's terrible, it's just nasty, or bad, mess up. And now I throw this crazy, bad, thoughts in her head out of my fear, not out of lovingly try to explain to her the value of herself, her body, her life, and her future husband, marriage, etc. I'm just, laying hard like that. So I'm not even doing it out of a right spirit. I'm doing it out of a fear for what it will do to me if she's out there like that, how it embarrass me and make me look, and etc. So then I think on the flip side of that is sometimes the people who are laying the standards so hard can often be trying to do it to cover up the fact that they're doing it, or that they're so close to doing it because the temptation is so strong in their lives. So it's like, hey, don't you watch pornography? It's hey, this is bad, it'll mess you up, this and that. When in reality, you're doing it, you haven't yet overcome it. But if I preach hard enough against it, no one will think it's me or question me. So I think that's another part of the taboo situation that's going on behind the scenes. And so it makes it, I think it can also make it difficult to discuss because again, you go back to church in the 80s and before, I'm throwing a time frame out there, I think that's a good time to say. 80s and before, you just didn't talk about some of those things. You just knew not to do it, don't say it, don't ask questions. If you question it, you're questioning God, you don't believe, and this and that. And then also, sometimes it was just those people, sometimes the parents or the preachers of those times, ministers who really didn't know how to have the conversation with me, really couldn't have a conversation about sex, didn't really know how to go about how to communicate and express and share, or didn't really want to share their stories and what they've been through and how it's kind of caused a problem. So they just say, don't do it. And I think you can still share, like you don't have to put all your business story out there, but you can still share and say enough to help another person out. So I think that's part of kind of what comes through it as well, that causes people to not want to talk about it, not to be able to talk about it. I think over the years, starting within the 90s, it started developing, and now it's a little more open that people can have the conversation, are open to it, and willing to kind of share. I think the generations have kind of shifted to a little more openness where you can kind of have a conversation. I think some of the problem is that conversation still has an age gap where that conversation might be somebody in the 20s talking to somebody in the teens. And really not giving good wisdom, and just kind of, hey, throwing little things out there. But I think sometimes maybe that person 40 and up needs to be talking to those persons in the teens that really, went through life and can kind of help share. So I think there's more openness, there's more conversation, but there's still a gap between some of those who I think should be having or engaging in some of that conversation. So.
Yeah, I think culturally too, over the years, sex has become just more accepted and more, I don't know if it's more accepted, more broad, more talked about. Like, I don't know if just in society, if we talked about sex as much in the previous years, as we do now. Like, it's everywhere.
Right.
We're in a very sexualized culture here in America. So I think that also probably plays a role, is that the world has started talking about sex and showing sex and displaying sex, a lot more. And then we're like, what? Gonna ignore it? Like, as if we're not being exposed as well, and having, no tools and stuff. So I definitely think that might be one of the reasons that it's becoming more accepted, because it's just culturally accepted.
Yeah, and I would say too that a lot of times this is our fault that the church gets left behind on topics. And it's often our fault because, like I say, we're just saying, don't do this, don't do that, abstain, focus over here. And then the world is teaching this, and your child is in school 6, 7, 8 hours a day. They're watching TV this amount of times a day or per week. They're online, on social media, all this stuff. They're hanging out with their friends, and all these topics are coming up regularly and being talked about. And then we're not talking, we're just saying, don't do it. Just pray, just love God. But the reality of human nature is, okay, well, what is going on? Like, I want to trust you not to do it and follow God, but all my friends are doing it, this and that, and it seems like it's not so bad. Help me out here to really kind of gauge this, because you think, when we went to college, you've seen a lot of people who maybe were or were not. Maybe they were active at home, and their parents just didn't know, or maybe they weren't active at home and they came to college and it just went wild, or they were in church all their life before they came to college, and they came to college and day one, they were done with church, they're out there doing their thing. And so I think sometimes that if the church approached it differently, where, like you said, show them how to navigate this life space and these different topics and subject matters, rather than just blocking them off as, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, don't go and just stay away from it. There was a reason for that, but I think that there's a reason to show how do you live this life, how do you navigate it, which is like, again, what Jesus did. He showed his disciples how to live and navigate. He wasn't like, oh, there's demons over there, don't go over there. He like, no, Jesus went where the demon was. I'm gonna show you how to deal with the demon. Oh, this person's sick, oh, they got leprosy, stay away from them. No, I'm gonna show you how to deal with the person with leprosy. Church is kind of like, oh, don't do that, watch out, watch out. But Jesus said, no, we're gonna go here and I'm gonna show you how to deal with that, because I have power over that, and I've given you power over that, so you can't walk in fear. No, you don't engage with it and become a part of it, but you take power over it and conquer it, and that's what I've given you to do. And I think that's one thing we have to really truly know, because we talk about it, we sing songs, we quote scriptures, but then we go out and live a life that shows we don't really believe we have the power over these things. And that's why we fall temptation and trap to them, because we don't believe in the power we have, we don't know how to actualize it, and we still remain subject to the enemy's powers in that. So I think that's an issue.
Yeah, and I think also identity, like actually understanding that we are God's masterpiece and we were created and formed with a purpose and a function. I think, and early on, in this, whether it be teens or 20s or whatever, it's so much I don't want to be different. I don't want to be, unique. Like there's something wrong with you. You're weird. Or there's something, as we're in our 40s and 50s, we realize that it is, hopefully we begin to realize, if we haven't already, that it is inside of our uniqueness. It is inside of who we are that God's, God's, function is like expressed through us. Like that is the thing that unlocks not only ourselves, but unlocks so many other people. It is the uniqueness that we begin to embrace. And I think that, it's almost like a trick of the enemy. Like, let me make sure that you are exactly the way everyone else is or wants you to be, so that you're not functioning properly, right? Because if you were formed and purposed for something, and you're trying to be an imitation or trying to be, what the world is telling you to be, then you can't fulfill that thing that you were called and purposed to do. And so I think the more that our identity is understood and the more that we embrace our uniqueness and we embrace who God has called us to be, then that begins to shine through. And our why is now totally different. And even, as far as like, when you would think everyone is choosing abstinence for the same reasons, but they're not. One of the things that I learned in my early 30s, is honestly there were more. I met more men who were open to abstinence that were outside of the church, because they were doing it for different reasons, health reasons, purpose reasons, different things. And even in speaking to the guys, within the last couple of years. Even there are different whys. Some definitely want to glorify God, with their mind and with their body. Others are like, look, I cheated. I want to be disciplined in this area so that this is not something that I put someone else through again.
Right.
Others are like, I was ministering for years, having sex for years, and was like, nah, this is not how I want to live my life. And so they begin, on a journey that begin to allow them to really reflect God in every area of their life. So it wasn't just about, just the one thing. But I think the closer, the more we understand our why, and the closer we are to the identity and the purpose that God has for us, then that frustration of, why has it been this long, Lord? Or, whatever, that begins to change. Our mindset begins to change. And that's one of the things, like for me, when DB asked me to make the course, I was just like, I don't want to, because I'm upset. I'm mad. Like, this is too long, Right. But then when I began to like really uncover these different areas, I was like, it was like something unlocked, mentally, mindset-wise, something unlocked. And it began to be a lot easier to deal with, and a lot easier really to begin to fulfill the things that God was having you to do.
Well, I think one of the big things you said there is the why. What is your reason for it? And a lot of people, even though there's a reason for it in general, or several reasons, a lot of people don't have a reason within themselves. This is like, well, my parents said don't do it. Church said you can't do it, you're going to hell. My teacher said don't do it, you're going to get pregnant, mess up your school and opportunities to for college, and coach said, hey, you're going to miss your opportunity for a scholarship. So, I'm trying not to do it. Or you hear that and you're just like, well, okay, maybe I can, be safe, or, work around it this way, or try to get an abortion. So, but I think when you have an actual why, that's the bigger thing. And I think that's what anyone needs to focus on. But I think particularly within the church, within the kingdom of God, there's a big why. And when you focus more on the why rather than the what not to do, the what not to do becomes easier because the why is so big. When you recognize, say for example, if you're an athlete, if someone just tells you, okay, don't eat too many sweets, cake stuff, this and that, you're gonna, in general, a person's gonna be like, well, that's what I like, this and that, whatever. But if you're an athlete and someone shows you, listen, if you eat this amount of sweets, it's going to do this to your body, it's going to mess up your chances for college scholarship. These individuals who are operating on this level, this is the type of diet they have, this is the type of workout schedule they have, this is the type of free time they use. It creates a bigger why to you, okay, that's the level I'm trying to get to. If this is the routine they function by to get to that level, and the people I'm seeing who don't function on that routine end up, lost over here, they're back home, don't get the scholarship, they're back out in the streets or whatever. I have a bigger why now. So now it makes sense not to eat those cakes, those sweets, that pizza all the time or whatever, stay up late, hanging out, drink, smoke, this and that. The why, the bigger why of the ultimate goal and purpose now makes those cakes, sweets, staying up late much smaller. And so when our why, when we can truly see God's purpose in our life, what God's calling us to, who we are in Christ, and all that has meaning to us, not abstaining from sex becomes a lot smaller. You don't look at it as about, like I said, like you brought up what I said before, like you don't look at it as something that you're not doing. You look at it as something that you are doing with God. I am walking with God. I'm fulfilling God's purpose. I am walking with Christ. I'm one with Christ. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19 or so, around that area, when it talks about, it says that meat for the belly, belly for meat, the body is not for fornication, but for the Lord. Whoever commits, sexual immorality becomes one with the prostitute, but whoever is united with the Lord becomes one spirit with the Lord. So it's like, it's not just about not having sex, so you don't, catch a disease, you don't have a baby out of wedlock, you don't, have other troubles and traumas. It's about you becoming one with the Lord and walking with Christ and what that life entails, because sex, according to God and to the scriptures, is a covenant, and it represents the union of marriage. And so there's a huge meaning to it that is connected to it, and the value of what comes along with it is important to God. And as you draw closer to God, it becomes important to you. You see the importance of it. You see the value of abstaining and focusing and waiting on the right person in time so that you can enter into that space of covenant. So I'm not just not having sex. I am walking with the Lord. I'm in union with Christ. I'm in covenant with the Lord and living in a lifestyle that fulfills that purpose in the earth. And so sexual immorality will contaminate that. So now I look at the sexual immorality as I gotta put that to the side. I gotta let the sex go, the temptation go, the pornography go, whatever other things that can pervert the purpose that God has me living. And so it's easier when you see the bigger picture, when you have that why, it's easier to make that thing smaller. But when you don't recognize the why, you disregard the why, you're just living out the lust. I can't do this, and that. You're stressing out about it, and you're likely to fall into it. And even if you don't fall into it, you're still not living out the full lifestyle and energy that you could have behind it. So I think that why you talk about is a big deal.
Yeah, I love the perspective of that you gave on diet, like not looking at the things you can't do. Like even, I think about the things that we eat, right? If someone is going on a diet or just trying to change their diet overall, if they're like, hey, don't eat carbs, don't eat, whatever, these things are things that typically don't last long term.
Right.
Because you're just like you said, focusing on the things you don't do. But if you're like, hey, I want to go on this eating plan, and these are some of the recipes, and these are some of the meals, and these are some of the things that are really good, and you're just trying these new things out that now have a better effect on your body, then you're gonna more so lean into that, because you're not focusing on the things that you're not doing. You're focusing on the things that you are doing. You're focusing on the meals that you can make. You're focusing on the activities that you can do. Your focus point is a lot different. And I think that's a good point out. To focus on the things that you are doing. You have a lot more long-term success that way in a lot of areas of life, definitely.
And I think real quick, I think it was Myron Gordon, I hear him sometime on Instagram. I think he was the one, it was him, he was talking about wealth mindset versus poverty mindset. And he was talking about how in the garden, God told Adam and Eve they could eat from all these trees in the garden. Not only that, the tree of life was in the garden. We don't really talk about that much. We just talk about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So, but they only focused on the tree they couldn't eat from. And he was like, that's the poverty mentality. They have all this abundance that they could eat from and splurge from whenever they wanted to, but they only focused on the one they couldn't access. And he was saying how people with poverty mindset just focused on what they don't have, what they can't have, and you kind of go in that direction. I want to get this, and you maybe you get that, and then now it corrupts your life and makes things even worse, takes you further in debt, causes more trouble, gets you in, some criminal activity because you tried to go about getting money this way, rather than looking at all that you could have if you go about it this way. And so I think that that's even kind of when you look at the sexual behavior and activities, where a lot of people is like, oh, I can't do this, and it's like your whole Christian life is like, oh, I can't do this, can't do that, oh, can't go there, can't hang out with them. But look at all the people you can hang out, look at all the things you can do, look at all the places you can go, look at all the activities you can get involved in that will give you a productive and successful life. But you're just focused on the one or a couple things you can't do or you're not supposed to do here. And you're so focused on it, you end up being drawn into it. Because some serpent comes and has a conversation with you. Oh, it's not that bad. Look, we do it. This didn't happen. People are just trying to make it seem like, it's so bad because they missed out on it. You end up getting talked into it, you do it, and then you realize how bad it was. So I think we have to have like that wealth and abundance mindset to see, look at all that God has given to us. Look at all that. He said again, life more abundantly. He said, I give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, whatever you bind and loose. All these things that he gave us to have and to do, but we're focused on the one little thing that we can't do.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a whole nother thing that comes to my mind, is that a lot of people date or have, interactions with the opposite sex with a poverty mindset. Right? Like, it's not just about money. It is truly a mindset that goes into so many different areas. People are talking about, oh, it's pee in the sea, or pee in the pool, or whatever. Having all these conversations. And like about a month or two ago, I was like, oh, why y'all in the pool? Like,
I'm about to say, go swim in another pool.
Or in the ocean.
Right.
They always say it's plenty of fish in the sea. Why are we in the pool in the first place? Like, a lot of times people are like going about dating with I'm not going to meet a man who's going to respect my values, or I'm not going to, this is here and this is why. We have to have that abundance mindset even in the dating world. And sometimes we get so derailed and distracted from the purpose that God has given us, and even from the person that, or some people think it's a person, some people think it's I don't know the word that I want to use, but from whoever it is that God has given you, we get so derailed from that, focusing on the temporaries, because we think, well, this is it. This is all I can get, or this is all I can have, because we're still thinking and approaching it from a poverty mindset, and what the lack is when we serve a God that is an abundant God. Yeah. We throw around statistics that are honestly very erroneous, about what we can't have or what's not available. And I just think it's just so interesting, like when you're just talking about that poverty mindset, how it really is a mindset that really overflows into so many areas of life, including dating.
Yeah. And that's even what you just said. Like, another thing is that people are just shallow. Like you said, like they're saying there's piss in the pool, but you're like, you can go into the sea or go into the ocean. Well, it's easier to stay in this pool. Where I can stand up in the shallow end, maybe it's a little bit of a deep end, but I can come back and hold on to the side. You go into the ocean, ain't no side to hold on to. You got to dig a little deeper. You don't want that challenge
waves
of looking deeper at, okay, I'm not going to compromise my values. I want someone who has the same purpose and goals and vision. And it may be more difficult to find that person, but the rewards of finding that person are just uncomparable to having someone that you got to compromise for. And now you're continuously in and out of relationships, having a child with this person, you got all these conflicts because you stayed and chose the shallow end where it seemed like it was safe,
Yeah, or even a rough end. So even when you start, I was in Mexico maybe a few months ago, and I went into the ocean. I'm so glad I rarely ever wear my what are they, the pool shoes or whatever. I can't think what they're called, but I had water those. Yeah, water shoes. I had those on, and I was walking out into the ocean, and it was really, really rough. Like, I mean, the rocks were rocking. Like, it was hard, and the waves were rough, and I was just like, maybe this was not a good idea, you know? Your girl like water, so I was like, I didn't get in this ocean. I got in that one over there, but we had to resort. I didn't get in this one. I'm getting in it before I leave. And I was going, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should go back. This isn't a good idea. And I just kept going, and then it got really, really sandy and really, really calm. Yeah. And it was so beautiful. And sometimes we stop or go back. Like, we stop on a rocky part, the rough part, and we just stay right there, dealing with all the waves and dealing with all the rocks. Or we're like, you know, I'm just gonna go back and I'm just not gonna deal with it at all. I'm just gonna, you know, be paralytic in this whole, you know, dating world, and I'm just not gonna focus. He'll come find me, you know, or whatever. Instead of like continuing to go forward, knowing that there is beauty on the other side of that. Knowing that there's a different experience on the other side of that, knowing that there's a different viewpoint and a different insight on the other side of that. And, you know, I just see, we just...
Yeah, you gotta get past those rocks.
Yeah.
But once you hit those rocks, you think it's rocky from here on out. And don't realize that's just a little piece of the process, you know? So...
Absolutely.
Yeah. You, well, I'm thinking too, you mentioned, and we had this conversation as you talked about the guys you spoke to. I think that's important for two things. One, that I think, you know, as believers, our ultimate reason is that we serve God, we believe God, we walk with God, and that's our purpose. But that guy who told you there are no abstinent men, and he probably fully believed that, but that's because of who he hangs around with, who he interacts with. If you're all day hanging around guys who are just kind of, you know, talking like that, thinking like that, you're listening to music, but that's all you're hearing, you're gonna get that. I remember a young lady I met years ago who, she said she didn't want to get married because she was like, you know, everybody cheats, nobody's faithful around. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's sitting there talking, I said, you know what, I remember since I met you, it's been like about 3 weeks or so. I said, one thing you kept saying was, your whole life you've been in the streets and in the clubs. And I said, if you spend your whole life in the streets and in the clubs, you're not gonna see healthy relationships and successful marriages. You're gonna see rocky stuff, you're gonna see inconsistency, you're gonna see fallout. Like, you're not putting yourself in a place to see healthy relationships and marriage. So that's why you think the way you do. And I think for this guy and for other people who think like this, male or female, you know, a lot of people put themselves in places where the likelihood to even see this type of behavior, to see a healthy relationship, marriage, or abstinence, you're not going to see, you're not going to hear it, you're not going to hear that type of conversation, you know. And so you have to sometimes change your environment to see what else is out there. And so along with that, so that was one thing that I wanted to point out, is I think a lot of people need to just change their environment and realize and see what else is actually out there. Number two with that is, as you said, there are men out there who are abstinent for various reasons, some for their faith and belief in God, some for health reasons, some for, like, you know, they're talking a lot about the semen retention now, and some feel like, you know, they've done so much in the past and they want to help, like, kind of regain themselves or find themselves. I think it was Outkast who said they did that for a year. Like, they didn't have sex for a year because they wanted to kind of like find themselves and kind of find who they are. And I think, and that's an important statement, because a lot of times, you know, you can get lost in the sexual activity, the pleasure and the joy of a thing. You lose yourself in the pleasures you're experiencing. But what I wanted to go back to there is just the fact that even when we talk about the taboo and not having the conversation, this and that, I think it's often more difficult for men. If you have a conversation about sex or abstinence or, you know, living holy in that way, women will kind of gravitate towards the conversation to some degree. Men will not. And I think that one of the things, I mean, even in church in general, and even in the Black church, the gap is different with the number of men versus women in the church. And I think a lot of that has to do with the nature of our approach and our conversations, that a lot of the church functions in a way that caters to women's natural social interactions. But it doesn't really do that for men. And I think that one thing, even as I said in the beginning, but even more so for men, men celebrate what they do well and what they accomplish. You see a bunch of men gather at a barbershop, watching a football game, or just hanging out. They're all talking about what they did, what I did last night, what I did yesterday. It could be good or bad. It could be, hey, I gave out 100 toys to the kids at the Salvation Army, or it could be, I drank 100 shot glasses last night, more than anybody else at the bar. Whatever, but when a man, like the nature of accomplishing and conquering something and building on that success, it builds up a man's confidence in himself and his ability to do more. And so men gather and talk about and celebrate what they do, what they accomplish. And so just, again, going back to the word, abstain means not to do, stay away from, to avoid. And so as a man, you have to conquer, we're designed to hunt, to protect our family. If you're going to protect, if you're the protector, you have to face danger. You have to put yourself in the face of danger to keep others from that danger. So don't do is goes against the nature of what I kind of need to do to be a man. If you're going to provide for your family, whether it's just providing health, safety, protection, house, resources, whatever, you have to get out there and do something. You got to get out there and find work. Back in the ancient times, it was hunting. Now it's more so pursuing a job and a career or a business entrepreneur opportunity that can help you be successful, financially, to take care of your family, taking care of yourself health-wise, spiritually, be in mindset focused, reaching your goals so that you can, encourage your family, your wife, and help them to do what they need to do. Whatever it is, men, the nature of a man and masculinity is to go out and do, to accomplish, to conquer, to take territory, and to protect it and guard it. So it's the whole nature of abstaining from sex is it doesn't speak to the nature of conquering, taking on, accomplishing, and doing. And so it's not even that men don't want to have the conversation. Sometimes it's how you have it and how you approach it. And sometimes the church is you have sex, you're not doing it, are you? You're not out there. And it's I don't even want to have a conversation about what I'm not doing, but the conversation is more so, even for me, that I am fulfilling God's purpose in my life. I am conquering the fleshly desire to compromise sexually. I have victory in that area. I was struggling here with whether it's just with sexual temptation or whether it's with pornography or some other format of perversion, and now I've overcome it. I was able to face myself and challenge it and overcome it, and I'm successful at living a life of sexual discipline and control over that area of my life. That's a more effective conversation to have with men, but it's kind of not the way it's been approached. And so guys just avoid that, because it's it almost sometimes weakens you, because it's tell us where you failed at. Tell us where you missed it. How'd you miss the mark? Oh, God can forgive you, make it better. And it's almost this little kind of pity pat conversation, and guys no, I need to be strengthened, I need to conquer, I need to overcome. So I think that the approach of the conversation distances men, but those men who are doing it for whatever reason, they are doing it because there's some form of accomplishment in me doing this. There's some form of conquering. There's some form of success, me building my life, becoming and realizing who I am and my purpose and how to fulfill that. And I'm getting a joy out of that. I'm getting a fulfillment and a completion out of that. And so those men feel more comfortable in having the conversation, but it still must happen a certain way. I know I said a lot on that, but
yeah, it's really, boldly declaring what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're accomplishing, what it is that you're conquering and having victory over. That makes complete sense, just from the aspect of, the viewpoint of manhood. That absolutely, resonates even with me, so I'm sure that'll resonate with men as well. And I think that's really the approach that we want to have. We're not going to get in a room. We're going to have the Purpose Over Passion Summit February 1st. We're not going to get in a room and just talk about, oh, let's not have sex and here's your strategies for not having sex. And that would make no sense to waste the day, doing that. We want to get in a room and we want to talk about how we're conquering, what are we doing, how we're setting up things. I was just talking to someone the other day, and she said, wait, you can release those same hormones without having sex or without touching yourself? Yes, you can. They are hormones, And there are ways to release those hormones in order because they're healthy, there are definitely other ways of releasing them. And so, having the conversations of the to-dos, can definitely help, this journey, long lasting.
Right. And the point you just said goes back to where we started from. Like you said, there's ways to release those hormones in other ways, because we as humans are designed to do. We're designed to release those hormones to experience the pleasures of life. But every pleasure isn't meant for every time of your life. And so as we learn other ways to release that pleasure, that energy, and experience that joy in life, then we feel more successful, and we're also healthy, and then we're also pleasing God with our body and with our spirit, living the way He calls us to. And that's even like a whole movement now of, I can't remember who it was who wrote the book, but talking about how replacing the sexual energy and that release and using it for other places, particularly for men, using it in business, in productivity, whether you like fixing cars, or whether you like, entrepreneurial ventures, or whether you like, rock climbing or some other sports activity. You're getting that same release in energy and productivity, and that testosterone is being used productively. So it doesn't have to be, sacrifice for like things at the lower level. So I think that's a good conversation you can have right there to help people realize the basic practical natures of even your physical body and what you're responding to.
Right, and we were designed to create. We're designed in the image of God, right? The creator of all things.
Right.
So we're designed to create. So if we're not procreating or creating children, we can definitely use that energy to create other things.
Right.
To create, things that are going to be impactful for people all over, the world. So definitely still creating, with that energy. I love that. I love that. All right. Anything else you want to, or you think we should touch on or talk about?
I think we touched on a lot. I think we hit on like a lot of the areas that are necessary to at least start and build up a conversation around this that can help people engage in it. I would just say I encourage anyone who's listening to continue to think on these things, pray on them, talk to yourself about them, talk to others, talk to God about them, and even study. Sometimes you just need to study and learn, how does the body and the mind react to this thing in different ways. But also join our conversation, join and, attend this event. You may find something that you didn't expect or know or hear. Meet someone or other people. Again, as you put yourself out there, you will find like-minded people and you will share in the journey. I encourage, if there's any men listening, that to become a part of the conversation. And maybe the church isn't doing it right. Maybe sometimes women's approach to the conversation isn't the most healthy or successful way that you feel like it should be. Well, be a help in that conversation. Don't just avoid it. A lot of times as men, we can just avoid what we don't like or what we don't want to hear, but sometimes we're not bringing ourselves to the table and say, listen, this is a better way to approach it. This is a healthy way to go about this that will make it more effective and productive. We're called to be leaders and to initiate, so this is a good time and opportunity to use your strength and your power to lead and initiate in this conversation in other areas that you may think not be done in the best or most efficient way. So I encourage brothers to take initiative on this, to come out, share, and be a part of the conversation in other virtual aspects and also in person at this event that we're going to have, which is going to be led by Dr. Rachel Silver here in this capacity. So we look forward to hearing you and seeing you there.
Absolutely, and we are going to have Minister AK as one of our speakers as well.
I'll do my best.
We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have a good time together. One of the things that I have, I create programs, I create courses, I have some degrees, and so, I like a good test, right? I do. So I actually have a sexual abstinence inventory that measures the 10 different areas for where you are. So you can see, okay, and I use this, when I do one-on-one coaching with people, I actually use the sexual abstinence inventory so we know which area we need to lean more in on. Is it the mindset area? Is it the boundaries area? Is it the managing setbacks area? Is it the hormonal area? It's kind of seeing, is it the belonging area? Like what area we need to lean more into and build up and develop more. Yeah. But I think I'm going to do, because it's 100 questions, so it's a good assessment, right? Yeah. But I think I'm going to do a how strong is your sexual discipline gauge. something a little shorter, but that can give the people, this is what my score is. Because I think, maybe it's just me, because, the whole education brain.
Right.
I think when we know our score, it also gives us something to work towards. Like, you know what? My sexual discipline was at a 42, or it was at an 82. Like, how do I get it higher? So I think I'm going to go ahead and put that out as well. Like, how strong is your sexual discipline gauge? What do you think about that?
I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have a way to practically, measure yourself, evaluate yourself, and kind of see where you are. Sometimes you got to see where you are so you can say, oh, okay, wow. And know where you need to go to work on from there. That'll work. I'll take it.
You take it, all right.
I may not tell everybody my score, but I'll take it.
Hey, I'm good for a score. We got love language, you got emotional intelligence. I'm like, okay, why not? Why not have a score for this as well? I definitely want to thank you so much for coming in into the purpose over passion. I don't know what I'm calling it, basement. I don't know. What we calling it?
That's cool. Basement's good for now.
That's good. Definitely thank you for coming and just sharing your mind, sharing your thoughts, and sharing your integrity. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Good to be a part.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see you guys soon. See you February 1st at the Purpose Over Passion Summit. And we have some other good things coming out for you as well.
All right.